I think you have to lead with strength. I think you have to lead with conviction. And I've said this to my kids as well as to others. You can fake it till you make it. You don't have to be 100%, but you have to exude 100% all the time. You may not be the expert today, but you have to be confident enough that you can stand with a level of conviction of understanding. And the passion is, I'm going to learn more, So I think in business as well as in life, your ego or your demeanor can't get ahead of you, but you certainly can be strong willed in terms of your stance at that particular time.
Imagine having direct access to someone who's navigated life's toughest terrains and come out stronger. Someone who's been there, done that, and can guide you with empathy, experience, and honesty. This isn't just advice. It's a lifeline, a strategy session, a chance to learn from my journey so you can accelerate yours. Without the ability to be self-aware and introspective, the ability for you to get to where you want to go, nearly impossible. Hey everybody, welcome back to the David Guttman podcast. I have a really exciting and interesting guest today, Chris Dalton. Chris's background is he's been a serial entrepreneur for, I think, since the late 80s. Sold companies to Salesforce.com, taking companies public, and been on boards of directors and a whole bunch of other stuff, I'm sure. And I normally spend a little bit more time on people's childhood, and we're going to do that a little bit and a little bit of background, but your professional journey has been so exciting. I'm going to probably spend a little bit more time there. So Chris, welcome to the podcast.
Thanks, Dave. Appreciate it.
So, been a serial entrepreneur. What did your folks do how did you get the entrepreneurial bug?
I'm not exactly sure I got the entrepreneurial bug from the family, other than I was one of 9 and I was number 8. So if you don't know how to hustle in a household like that, you're going to be in trouble. I remember back in the day, having 6 sisters, that there was a entrepreneurial opportunity to actually use the money I had to actually trade for them to go out on the weekends. So they would want to go out on the weekends. So I'd do loan sharking in my house to help them to afford their weekends. And it was a fun period of time where I figured out my business acumen back then. You did the traditional paper out, and then I outsourced it to my little brother and took a margin on it. I think at the age of going to college, my mother was like, you need to go to school and you need to be successful and you need to get out of the house. It was an exciting time. I moved to Milwaukee and had a chance to go to Marquette. Met an amazing group of people there, all, again, entrepreneurially driven. I'm not sure what it was about the Midwest, but it was like there's like a flavor of entrepreneurialism and independence and business or acumen that was there. And I'm like, I'm gonna jump into the fun. So I actually enjoyed college, but I think I learned more about business going to college and the hustle. At the end of the day, it was always the hustle. So it was always like, what can I do next? So it's been an exciting lifestyle.
Were you a good student in high school and in college?
I used to say I'm like the best C student that you can actually have. I wasn't very attentive to education, other than the experiential part of learning other people and what they were doing and how they were being successful. So to me, I think the experience of college was more about learning about how to interact and how to hustle. And, when you come out, it doesn't matter what your degree is. I had a business administration degree. Information technology was my specialization, but I just realized that there was so much in life that you could actually go out and achieve.
Did you play sports? Did you have any coaches or teachers? Maybe even though you weren't the best student, maybe you had a teacher or a coach that was particularly influential, or not really?
No, I can't say that. I mean, I did play a little bit of basketball, did a little bit of football, and wasn't very good in either. Uh, I don't know that I could look at any uh, coach or teacher that was an influence. I was always an observer of others and um, intrigued by just numerous people that came in and out of my life that were hardworking and were dedicated towards what they were doing and driven. And to me, I think I got more inspiration from those types of experiences than any one individual.
Got it. So, I just found this out as we were sort of talking before we went on camera, that we basically started our careers at the same place at Arthur Andersen and Andersen Consulting. So maybe talk about just that early part of your journey, which I feel like is really interesting because you went from 0 to 100 pretty fast.
Yeah, I did. I had the fortune of uh, my sister knew a gentleman that was working with Arthur Andersen, and he was willing to take an opportunity with me to start at the lowest possible level within Arthur Andersen. It was tax and audit before the big split, and to me, to be in that work experience, to be in the corporate environment was really exciting because I was like, wow. I remember distinctly thinking about all the people I was interacting with who had, you know, accounting degrees and all these other uh, very esteemed educational experiences, and I didn't think I was anything that was would merit any of that value. But I was like, why are they doing this and what are they doing? And I thought there's something in here that's actually pretty interesting. Obviously, as you said, in the late 80s, it was the onset of technology. I remember we were asked to demonstrate why a computer was important. And if you think
Right.
about it, like, I mean, I hate to date ourselves and say we're old, but like when you think about it, why is a computer important is so um, commonplace now that you don't even think about it. But to be at that onset of that type of a generational change, to me, it just immediately struck a chord with me that said, there's something significant that's happening in the world right now. And I think if you can be in the room and be a subject matter expert on something that's emerging, you may not actually have to be that smart, but you can be there and be intelligent about why it's important. So those early days were really instrumental to me, and working for a big corporation was instrumental at the time. As I said to you earlier, uh, I had to change directions to go entrepreneurial, but I really do look back at that as a really important time in my life.
Did you have a mentor that, really invested time and energy in you, or was it more you assembled, mentors from a some of team of people that you interacted with over the years?
I don't know that I've ever looked back and said there was a mentor. I'm a little bit uh, belligerent and um, driven. So I observe people, I look at what they do, and I want to know what I could do better than them. It's a competitiveness. There's an edge there. So while I believe I've been enlightened by a lot of people, a lot of really talented people and experienced people, I just want to know, is there something that they're doing that I could do better? Is there something I could drive myself to do something stronger or faster? And probably to a challenge I have is I take on more risk than most people would.
Right. Well, I think that's something that's been a recurring theme, which is I don't think people realize that if you're really an entrepreneur, and I don't mean like a solopreneur and you've got a dry cleaning business or something like that, but a real entrepreneur that's trying to drive real growth and real exit value, that your appetite for risk has to be almost deranged.
It is, and deranged is a very good word. I always say to people, if you want to start a business and you don't on that same first day understand what the exit is, you ought not to have started that business. And a lot of people are you know, confused by that, and they say, "Well, how could you possibly understand what the exit is when you're just starting it?" And I said, "It's purposeful, maybe a manifestation of what you want to do is that if I say I'm going to start this business and in 3 years I want to sell it to the largest software company in the world, most people would look at you and go, "Well, how are you? Why would you assume that that could happen?" And in my case, I'm like, because that's exactly what I'm going to do. Every step I take, every move I make, every metric I establish is going to be towards that end. And I've had the fortune of actually being able to do that.
Yeah. Well, I definitely want to get into those details. But early, early in my career, and I think we talked about this before. I didn't even know what a stock option was, and I was worth $300,000 on paper at the age of 24. And I was thinking, and I swore to myself at that moment, I will never work anywhere without equity ever. Because it's like, to me, I was just like, hey, look, if I'm going to roll the dice and I'm going to believe in myself, I got to have the upside. And if I'm going to move the needle, I need to have at least a piece of it. I knew you had a similar sort of awakening, if you will, in terms of like, hey, I got to have a piece of something, or otherwise I'm going to do something else. Maybe talk about that portion of the journey a little bit.
Yeah, I'm not sure I understood it at the time as much as I do now in retrospect. But you hit it on the head. If you are just working at a job with a salary, it's a great situation, but you're never going to make life changing financial impact to yourself unless you have equity. When you step over the line and say you want equity, you have to understand that the parties that you're talking to do not want to give you that equity. They do not. I mean, there's just inherently that's opposing to them because it dilutes them. You're taking something from them. What I realized was unless you push yourself into that game, unless you say, I'm as important as you are, I'm going to work as hard as you do, I'm going to deliver value and increase enterprise value in the same construct that you would, then you're not really you're going through the paces, you're doing your job, that's fine. Every company has lots of employees, but not every company has lots of equity holders. So early on in my career, I had a situation where I was generating about half of the revenue for the company that I was working with, and the owner wasn't inclined to participate in giving me any equity. So I was forced to actually leave with the premise that if I go somewhere else, I'm not going to work any other place unless I have equity. That now 30 years later was probably the first time I stood up for myself and said, I'm worth ownership in what I do. And in doing so, I then, started a career path of a number of successful businesses to which I had ownership in it. And to be honest with you, it's been the best experience of my life.
So I think your two biggest successes are the company that you took public and the company you sold to Salesforce. Do I have that about right?
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, and so one early in your career, you had a team of at least two other people, and full disclosure. So I'm the president of Investify, and Chris is the investor person on our board of directors. But I know both Matt and Paul obviously are people that you've worked with through a number of businesses. Maybe talk about how you decided these were guys you wanted to hitch your wagons together to, and talk about that path a little bit.
Well, it was happenstance. To be honest with you, when I left Arthur Andersen, and then subsequently went to my first entrepreneurial venture, which was Lante Corporation. Um, I had worked with them for about 5 years, and then ran into this issue of equity and wanted to have an opportunity to have equity. And so, in leaving Lante, I went to go find another opportunity, and I met Matt and Paul and another guy named Scott Spear. Um, all three or all four of us were just really scrappy, young, driven guys that wanted to be successful. As you know, uh, they're diverse.
Yeah.
You have very conservative people, you have very eccentric people, differing personalities completely. But one of the things I actually have reflected on a lot in life is the opportunity to work around and be shoulder to shoulder with so many great people in my career, at least in Matt and Paul's context. They've been with me for almost 30 years, and we've done many businesses together. And I think the fluidity of knowing them and understanding that they have differing specializations and skills, that we can lean on each other and actually depend on each other to be successful together, has been a huge part of our success. And I think, as we were talking earlier this morning, entrepreneurialism is a very challenging endeavor. If you're at it alone and you're the sole proprietor and you have no one else to talk to bounce questions off, to think about, like, should we do this? Should we grow more aggressively? Should we not? Should we take on this expansion or not? I've just come to the conclusion that having that group of people was immensely valuable to me and my career and to our careers. I always say, if you have to take on $1 million or $8 million liability and you can split it three ways, it's a lot easier to swallow than it is if it's
Yeah.
all on your shoulders. And if you have to make a really critical business decision, to be able to turn to somebody you know has the same percentage equity as you do and look at them and say, are we ready for this? Is this the right time? Should we do this? And if everybody's bought in, you now have the power of a multitude of people coming together.
So these are two people, Matt and Paul. I haven't met Scott, but Matt and Paul, at least from the outside looking in, these look like people you would pretty much trust with your life. Is that fair?
Very much so.
Yeah. So to develop that level of trust, like you said, it was somewhat opportunistic in the beginning. How did you develop that level of trust? I'll say from my own experience, what I've seen is if you want to see what someone's character is really like, how do they behave when things go really, really well? Like, how greedy do they get? And how do they behave when things go really, really badly? Do they pass the buck? Are they willing to own whatever part of that's theirs? So that's been my experience. I'm curious how you came to the conclusion that, hey, these are guys I can genuinely trust.
It is certainly something that grows with time. I I probably have done more self-reflection and learning about this subject because I'm I have a temperament where I'm just driven. I just want to push. I want to push the most out of people that are around me. I remember various times throughout that journey feeling agitated and frustrated by um, individuals' different um, approaches to things. So, whereas one person could be a bull in a China store, you can push forward and just be like, I'm going to get this done. And you look at another person, and as you know, some of the relationships with these people, some are more conservative and demure and just calm. And in my case, I had to learn that even though inside of me was a raging fire, I had to look across at one of my friends and one of my business partners and say, they might not have that raging fire perspective, but internally they're thoughtful about everything they do. And at the end of the day, results are the biggest impact. So when you see your head of sales and head of marketing driving enormous growth, while I could say to them, hey, you should do it differently, the reality is I probably should just shut up and let them do it the way they do it. If I look at my financial team or my operations team and say, why aren't we doing X, Y, and Z? And then you realize they have a plan, and you have to trust that plan and let them execute the way they're doing it. I think delegation is an interesting concept, and for spirited entrepreneurs who don't understand how to delegate or aren't comfortable delegating, you run into a lot of challenges, and I certainly didn't get there from the onset. I had to grow to get there, and it took a lot of patience to understand that, let people do what they do best, and hold everybody accountable to the highest standards you can possibly get. But you learn to grow and love these people, not only as friends but as business partners and associates along the way.
Yeah. Well, it's funny, you said two things that not really at odds with each other, but they're two sides of the same coin, perhaps. Which is, you're right. People that have equity are often reluctant to give any of it up. With that being said, you did take a different approach with your business partners, where even though you were the CEO. It sounds like you were fairly generous with everyone. Everyone's goals were incentives were aligned, right? Because they were, I don't know if everyone had exactly the same amount of equity, but they certainly had huge amounts of equity. So why is that the approach you decided to take, since that's not what your experience was before that?
As I said, when you start a business, you need capital. So right out of the gate, everyone can open up their wallet and see how much capital do you have. How much do I have? How much do you have? Is there enough for us to do something? That is a very humbling, level setting element right out of the gate. And we went equity equal. Everybody had 25% at the onset. It took a while for me to swallow that pill, because at the end of the day, you were asked to be the CEO. So you presume you have the most equity. But when you really kind of reflect back on that aspect that I was talking about around collaborative leadership, and you have everybody working together, you can't set uh, aggressive goals like 100 million or $200 million worth of revenue unless everybody's completely bought it. And so I think too many people in entrepreneurial situations get hung up on how much of the equity do I hold. Reality is, what's the enterprise value I'm leaving at? It isn't a big enough number for me to be happy at whatever percentage I have. And in most cases, and this is interesting, founders leave businesses with about 10% of equity. So if you think about it, you're like, you start out with 100, but you take on investors, you take on other partners, you take on employees and other sorts of things. It diminishes down to roughly 10%. So if you want a big exit, you have to big enterprise value to be able to equate that number. So for me, I just think that having that team and understanding the nuances of, it's not about me being in control and having the most of the pie. It's about how big can we make the pie. And if everybody's bought in, that's a really great feeling.
Yeah, no, that makes a lot of sense. So, you're the company that you grew that eventually IPO'd. So you've had a big private exit and you've had a big public exit. Maybe talk a little bit about kind of how those businesses were different. Are there fundamental differences in how you grow a business that's looking for a public exit versus a private exit? And talk about maybe some of the pain points of both.
Well, in the public exit, it was a services based company. And we ran it for 13 years. We had 45% compounded annual growth over the 13 years. We were doing strong EBITDA performance. So the metrics presented themselves as this could be a good public company opportunity. As you know, services businesses are very uh, unpredictable in terms of the revenue. So it's not a great company to run in the public market, but it is a great opportunity when you're in the public market to attract suitors. So theoretically, what we were doing was we were creating a situation to which we would have a currency to trade at um, higher valuation and in a public marketplace. So Accenture approached us and bought us 1 year after we were public. And it was the first time Accenture had bought a public company. So the exciting part was we're a public company, they're a public company. We were able to join forces together and create a big part of what is Accenture Digital. But when I exited that, and Paul, Matt, and I sort of stepped back away, we looked at it and said it was great to do. The multiples were exciting, but they weren't as aggressive as the multiples in the software industry and in the SaaS industry. So, um, interestingly, we decided let's pivot out of services and let's go into software. And our thesis at that time was, can we find something that is, in a very aggressive growth stage, and can we add our expertise to that business and get in and get out in a very short period of time? So again, back to my original statement of I like to know exactly what I want to do with the business before I even start it. So in this case, we were able to acquire a small company that was doing e-commerce software on top of the Salesforce platform. And we were able to identify this as a unique nuance that didn't exist in the marketplace. Even more so that Salesforce had it, but didn't realize it was there. And in doing so, we were able to talk to the founder. We were able to acquire the company. And the thesis was in 36 months, can we sell this to Salesforce? So step back away from that for a second and say, you just talked about selling a very small, unknown company to a $20 billion organization that is leading the software industry that you had never met. And in that particular example, and it is a true story. We walked in, we talked to their M&A people before we bought the company, and we said, we're going to buy this company and we're going to sell it to you in 36 months. And they looked at us and they said, we don't even know who you are. Why are you even talking to us? We took it from under $1 million in recurring revenue to 20 million in recurring revenue, and we sold it to them in 29 months. So a really cool example, very purposeful, and every person we hired into that business was told specifically, that's the objective. Do nothing but we're building this thing to sell it to Salesforce. So make it happen.
So that's interesting. And I would argue, at least in my professional career, that's fairly unusual to have it play out like that, right? Most businesses pivot at least a couple times. So that's in any of your other businesses, were there a lot of pivots or are there other parts in your career where, were there any companies in your career where you had to make some pivots?
Yeah. I mean, in the services business that we ran for 13 years, we certainly had to pivot. We started out, we built websites, and then we had 9/11 happen and no one wanted to build or buy a website. We pivoted to operational efficiencies. We pivoted several times throughout that in terms of the specifics of what we were building and types of technology. I think the unique part about the software business that we had was it was such a tight window of time and it was such a purposeful exit so that we didn't really have any window or need for pivoting. I guess maybe if you argued one pivot would be, are we selling commerce to retail or are we selling commerce to business organizations? And we chose the business to business organizations, mostly because it was more lucrative and less sexy, but it was more impactful. I'm a huge proponent for understanding and pivoting when necessary. And as you know, in some of the businesses we're involved in now, we do a lot of pivoting. Um, uh, and I'm very proud of the fact that we can be, we have a perspective of when to pivot and how to pivot and making sure that it's right. So I'm a big fan of pivoting. I just think that back to my original point, even if you're going to pivot, you can't lose focus on what you're trying to do. Like if you think about business metrics, if you're not growing at greater than 30%, if you're not producing better than 10, 15% EBITDA on the bottom line, if you're not creating growth numbers, no one's going to give you the enterprise value that you want. And if you get into that circular, I have an expectation of what I want to get out of this, but aren't fulfilling on hitting the metrics and numbers, those two will never come together. So it's my belief that regardless of whatever the pivot is, as long as the metrics continue to meet, then you'll be fine.
Got it. So now you built, and again, let's just take your two most successful companies. You built one team over a 13-year period, right? And then the other one, less than 3 years, 2.5 years basically. Did you think about building, how you thought about building those teams different or the same?
Well, I had the fortune of making a lot of people very, very wealthy in the first transaction. So they were very interested
That
to
opens
come
a lot
with
of
it.
doors.
Yeah, they were very interested to continue. So it was kind of like pulling up the Rolodex and going, "Hey, you want to do this again?" And there's a level of satisfaction when you can confidently stand there and tell another set of executives, "This is what we're going to do. And we're going to do this in 36 months. And we're going to do this with $1 billion exit in mind." It catches a lot of people's attention. So,
Sure.
and more importantly than that, the beauty of doing that with a group of people that you're familiar with is you don't have to go back and re-educate everybody about what the strategy is. You don't even have to go back and question whether or not they're going to execute well. For me to be able to go to the bullpen and grab some of the best talent in the world, and for many of those cases and many of those people, I think they probably were contemplating, is this another 13-year run? Because I don't know if I got the fatigue in me to want to go another 13. But if you're serious about doing this in 36,
Right.
and everybody in the room is dialed in on the only way we're going out is to hit 20 million or better in recurring revenue, everything starts to flow. And so we had the fortune of having that access to those people. And then to the others that came and joined us, they probably joined because they knew this is a group of people that have done this before and they're not messing around. They're going to go in there and they're going to be wildly successful. And if I were to start another company, I would call that same group of people up and I would have that same, I remember when we started Acuity Group, we met in a pizza shop and, met with a bunch of colleagues that we had been working with. And we said, the last company that we were with was not successful. And we're going to be successful. So anybody in this room wants to join that, we're going to be there and we're going to make that happen. And to be honest with you, 13 years later, I think we had everybody that was in that pizza shop still working with us.
Nice.
Like it was a phenomenal group of people. And to this day, I don't think there's a time where I don't run into somebody that says that group you had, that set of athletes, that set of professionals was maybe the best in the industry. And for you to be able to call upon them to do that again and do it in another business. None of us had done software. None of us had done recurring revenue. None of us had done a product play, but all of us jumped in. We were like, let's go eat this up. we were very successful.
So you had like your own PayPal mafia kind of.
It was. I do believe there is some real value in the PayPal mafia concept.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Well, talk a little, obviously, your core team, the guys who, the leadership, folks who were with you from company to company. What about the filter and the screen that you guys used? Because the company you took public, how many employees was that total?
That was about 800.
Okay, so that's a pretty good sized team. What was the filter you guys used for who you guys are bringing onto your team? Did you guys have a thoughtful approach to your recruiting and retention and promotion? Kind of screen, if you will.
Yeah. Interesting question. I always had a philosophy that if you had a direct connection, like you had every person knows who hired the last person, and there was a connection to them, that would build a better a reliance upon quality and people. Like if you said to me, "Hey, I know a guy."
I actually said that to you.
Yeah, but I will look at you and go, I don't care about the guy. I care about you telling me that you know a guy,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And I'm going to hold you accountable because you told me you know a guy, right? So there was a fabric of connection throughout everybody. And Dave, I psychotically, I would go into every recruiting meeting. And if you think about 800 people, like after 10 years, I would still go to every recruiting orientation session. And I would give, and many people would laugh. They'd say, "You've been in there for an hour." Like you're, and the reason I would be in there for an hour is I would give a story that said, we went through a dating process. A recruiter called you and said, "Hey, I want you to work here." And you said to them, "I'm talented and this is what I can do." And between the two of you, independent of me as the owner, you kind of concluded that somehow you could be of value. So I said, when I bring you into this meeting and you're starting on your first day and now I'm standing in front of you, I'm going to remind you of that commitment that you made. The second thing I'm going to do is I'm going to deputize you right now and say, you're now not allowed to tell me you're new. I said, because next week I'm going to hire another 30 people. So instantly I want to remove that excuse that you were new and you didn't understand, because immediately that's the first thing that everyone goes to is, I didn't know where the handbook was. I didn't understand what the rules were. I didn't know where this was. I had all these excuses about why I couldn't be successful. So my conversation at that stage was, that's no longer an exception. And on top of it, I'm going to tell you that the commitment that was made between the person that said you should come here and you saying I'm valuable is a bond. And we need to actually work together to make sure that we maintain that bond. So I'm going to tell you that every other person that I've had this conversation with is going to look at you with the same level of scrutiny that says, you were already told you're not new. And on top of that, you were told that you have value. And if you're not delivering that value, somebody's going to find you and they're going to remove you, right? So that pressure cooker was always there, and that ability to say, hey, let's make sure that we're all in this together. And and I would say this right out of the gate, if somehow you were confused and you got here and you don't believe in that, there's the door. I'd rather you leave now than later. And so I think in that philosophy, and having done it for 13 years with every employee that started, everyone would tell you, I've been deputized, I'm empowered, and I have control of our destiny, instead of I'm a cog in the wheel that doesn't have any influence. And the CEO directly said, if I have any issue, if I run into a project manager or a person that doesn't seem to be philosophically on the same page, I ought not to just sit in the corner and digress and leave and then say to a recruiter on the way out, I just wasn't happy with my job because I wasn't satisfied with the manager, blah, blah, blah. Instead, if you take that ownership and you say, that person is not operating in the same philosophy that the CEO said, I'm going down to his office and I'm going to explain to him that there's somebody in your ranks that is not bought in. I said, I'll defend you all day long.
I remember you telling a story when we were down in Austin about some crazy shit with HR and they're wanting to redo the cubes and they bought some stuff that maybe talk about that, because I love that story.
Yeah, it was a funny story. It's along the same lines. You know, when you empower people and you deputize them and you instill a sense of ownership, which I think goes back to your question about equity. If I'm getting more out of this than just a paycheck, if I believe that my exit has more materiality than just I worked here, it was a resume, you know, check a box, you're going to take a level of passion and commitment. So in that case, we were expanding rapidly, growing different offices, and I had actually empowered and emboldened people to do things that were going to make us as efficient as we possibly could be. And I had an employee that did not think a 3x3 cubicle was the right environment for them to be successful. So they took the walls down and reconfigured the office space into more of a communal environment and bought a futon and put some plants and stuff in there. The corporate ops people called me up and said, we have anarchy going on in Dallas and we need to stop it immediately. And I said, well, what did they do? And they explained it to me. And I said, did you get a picture? They said, no, we didn't get a picture. We just knew they were taking the furniture down. I said, well, why don't you get a picture and then let's talk about it. Got a picture and it looked like a really cool feng shui kind of work environment. I talked to the employee that was responsible for it, and they were obviously intimidated by the CEO calling. And I just said, hey, what was your rationale? And he brought it up and he said, the conversation that you had with me the first day I started. He goes, you told me that I should be emboldened to do everything we possibly can do to be successful as a business. And I looked at this and said, the configuration that the ops people were giving us was not going to be conducive for us to be in the most effective working environment. So I changed it. You kind of inspired me to change it. So right out of the gate, I went back to the ops people. I said, we're not changing it. Every office from here now will follow that standard, and we won't put cubicles up anymore. We'll actually make it a more open and collaborative work environment. So perfect example of that playing out. And empowerment is one of the most powerful things. I think if you look at successful businesses, you look at successful companies, it's people that feel like they have an actual way of impacting the success.
Yeah, I think the two things that get overlooked the most are alignment of incentives, whether that's having the right commission structure. You know, it's like you see this all the time in businesses that aren't well run, where they're going to cap commissions. There's an old company of mine, they're about to lose their best salesperson because they're doing, they keep shrinking territory and screwing with their commission structure. It's like, don't mess with your revenue, man. So alignment of incentives. And the other one is giving people agency, really giving them autonomy to make decisions. Because if you can't trust someone to have some decision-making autonomy, they probably shouldn't be in your business in the first place.
Absolutely. And it sounds corny, but when you deputize people in the weirdest of ways, they look at you like, what do you mean you're deputizing me? I said, because if I can empower the same ownership concept into you right now, day one, the first day you start, and you walk to the coffee maker and you find out there isn't something there or you walk to the desk or you go, there is no handbook. You think there's a handbook, but there isn't a handbook, right? Either you're going to just go, well, I guess that's just the way it is. And you file it and you never talk to anybody about it. Or you go, that's not the way I would do it. Like, I'd rather the debate come up and say, we need something different here, whether it be physical or structural, or it be, I said, it could be a use case or a best practice or a methodology we use. If you look at something and go, this is ridiculous, as you and I have talked about on numerous business occasions, if I walk around the problem's never going to get solved.
Right.
If I don't think it's my responsibility to solve it, it's never going to get solved. If you as the CEO think you have visibility into all the nooks and crannies that exist in a business, you're foolish. We don't see everything. We see a very high, uh, superficial degree of it. It's the people that work every day and they go, you know what? This company makes me go around this thing every day. And to me, there are a lot of complacent people that will continue to go around that. But that obstacle, whatever it is hindering your ability to be more efficient and more successful. So get rid of it, identify it, and empower people to bring it to your attention versus a fiefdom that says, I don't want you to talk. I want you to actually speak.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I feel like that is one of the things too. Even in smaller organizations, I have to remind myself all the time that I can say all I want. Yeah, I have an open door policy. You can come to me with anything. I actually do the same thing that you do, which is I'm on every onboarding call. We're a virtual company, obviously, but I make sure that I'm present on every single onboarding call. I want everyone to have that direct experience. But I still have to be aware of the fact that it's hard for people to come to senior leadership, and so you have to really go out of your way to make people understand that you really mean it. Because I think a lot of cases people give lip service to it and they don't mean it quite as much.
Yeah, there's a lot of lip service, but I think if you not only say it, but you actuate it and you actually do it, and and you know, uh, take example of walking down the hall as an executive or a leader of the company. If you don't know that person's name, stop and ask them. If you don't understand what they do, introduce yourself. If you walk by people and you have an aloof kind of, I don't know or care. And think about this: at 800, it was hard for me to recognize everybody and know everyone's name, but I was very passionate about saying, if I don't know you, I'm going to shake your hand in the hallway and I'm actually going to ask you what you do and I'm going to ask you how you're doing it. And and to me, I'll gain something from that interaction. I'll learn something about the nuance of who we've just brought in or the types of skills that they were delivering or what they felt at that time. And if you open up and encourage that kind of dialogue, you'll be surprised what you hear. It'll make you healthier.
No doubt about it. Well, that's a good segue to how you think about ego and humility, both your own and those of the other people on your teams.
You know, ego and humility are uh, things that are dynamic. I I could say I'm abrasive. I'm a very strong-willed person. I demand a lot of people, but I'm also open and vulnerable. So I'm willing to be like, I'll have the conversation in the hallway, or I'll go out to dinner or have a drink with somebody for an extended period of time and talk very passionately about what I believe in. Um, I think you have to lead with strength. I think you have to lead with conviction and I've said this to my kids as well as to others. You can fake it till you make it. Like you don't have to be 100%, but you have to exude 100% all the time. You don't have to. We talked about new technologies and new things that are happening, and you may not be the expert today, but you have to be confident enough that you can stand with a level of conviction of understanding. And the passion is, I'm going to learn more. So I think in business as well as in life, um, you know, your ego and or your demeanor can't get ahead of you, but you certainly can be strong-willed in terms of your stance at that particular time.
Right. One of the things that I've observed is oftentimes, so you just take people who are public personas like a Jordan Peterson, Ben Shapiro, Alex Hormozy, Grant Cardone, people like that, people that have huge followings. What I find, and even those people are, intellectually really smart and very successful business people, they often seem emotionally invested in almost like their identity is in being right. And if your identity is in being right, it makes it pretty tough to take in new information, which makes it hard to make adjustments. And even if you're Elon Musk brilliant, you're still going to be wrong something like 25 or 30% of the time, and that's if you're Elon Musk brilliant. So, how do you think about having the humility, both for yourself and for others on your team, to be wrong?
Well, I think you have to be introspective in the context of uh, we're always learning. We're always learning. I think you can be belligerent and foolish if you lean too far in and be of the mindset that you're too smart to gain anything. I think one thing I've learned through life is every interaction you have, you're going to pick up something of value. Um, Even if you're debating a subject that is you're on polar opposite positions on, I'm always introspective of what drives you to that conclusion, what formulates your opinion on that. I often think that if you can be self-reflective of the fact that there are differing opinions, it challenges you to evaluate everything you do under a level of recognition that I'm probably not 100% accurate in what I'm doing. I might be 80. So if there's 20% of fluctuation in that. I got to be open and willing. You know, uh, where I would differ is if you don't have the same goal and objective. Like back to this issue on business. If I want to make $100 million business and you believe we're fine at 20, we have a big difference.
Yeah,
We're
yeah,
not going
yeah,
to settle that. We're
yeah,
not,
yeah,
I'm going to respectfully disagree with you and we're going to part ways.
yeah, yeah.
If you say, I think it could be 95, and here's the reason why, I think directionally we're going in the right area and we could debate the nuances and differences of that. But if you're opposed to the objective, then I think you become a hindrance. So it's a matter of instilling the collaboration and ability for everyone to contribute, instilling the opportunity for everyone to feel like they have a voice in the room, but yet um, not being maniacal in the nature that you're the oppressor of the conversation.
That makes sense. Now, even though you didn't have a formal mentor yourself, have you been a formal mentor? I mean, I'm assuming obviously you probably are to your son Luke, and your daughter, who I haven't met, but Luke's a great kid. Are there other people, maybe Keon, who's the CEO of Investify? Are there other people that you sort of have more formally had a mentorship relationship with?
Yeah, I mean, there's dozens of people that I would say are good colleagues, friends that I'm I I I I I really do believe that being open to be able to offer perspective is a genuinely good thing for any human being. I love the friendships and relationships and business people that I've had over the years, and I don't tend to be instructive in the context of this is what you should do.
Right.
I like to listen. I like to offer perspective that I can, and in many cases, for the either board seats I sit on, or the investments that I'm involved in, or the mentorship that I participate in, I think it's always a um, mutual benefit. So I gain because I'm learning. As you know, we're getting old, and there's a lot of young people out there, and I think there's a perspective that entrepreneurialism is easy. I think there's this perspective that I'm just going to start a business. Well, that's great. And I'm just going to get really rich because you did, right? I'm like, that's great. And you realize it's just not that easy. And as we've seen in the nuances and things that you and I have been involved in, these pivots, these economic changes, these regulatory implications, these personnel nuances that we've dealt with, each one of those independently could stop you and stall you from being successful. And you have to have that collaborative thinking, like we were talking about. When I could go to Matt and Paul and go, "Hey, what do you think we should do in this situation? Like we're screwed. Like this is a bad spot, right?" And to be able to turn to two colleagues, friends, mentors, people that you really respect and go, "Can we get through this? Can we take it on the chin a little bit further to go and make it through this hardship and time?" To me, was instrumental in our success. So what I say to the entrepreneurs and people I mentor or people I'm involved with, I go, I get it. You feel like the mountains on your shoulders. I get it that you can't sleep at night. I get it that you are really uncomfortable. But take a deep breath, because we're all in this together. And let's talk about it. Let's figure it out. Let's get through this, and let's make ourselves stronger and better. And I know you've seen it firsthand with the things we've done together. It's amazing to watch the transformation of those people. And I'm picking on younger executives and entrepreneurs, because I can watch them over the course of several years mature right in front of us, right in front of us. And it's a beautiful thing, because they get savvier, they get more specific in what they're trying to do, and they get more purposeful throughout everything they're doing.
And more intentional, for sure. I don't know if you remember the lunch we had when you were interviewing me. I had signed the NDA, and I'd gotten the financial forecast, and I remember saying, "You're not going to hit these numbers. You're going to need another revenue stream." And I have an idea, right? I said, "I know just the guy," like I was saying before. But one, I was curious, did you think I was crazy? And I guess the second thing is, which I'll come to in a second. Well, let's start there, because I want to talk about how that all played out, because it was quite a journey.
Yeah, I mean, there's a couple of foundational things to think about. When you're a serial entrepreneur and you're the guy in charge and you're the one calling the shots, you can build a lot of confidence in what you're capable of doing. When you're an investor and you're writing a check and you're empowering people to do something, and you're really not doing the day-to-day, it's an uncomfortable feeling, especially because if you come from an operator perspective.
Right, which a lot of investors don't.
They don't. And the interesting part about that, and I think the perspective that entrepreneurs should take, is if you're talking to a money person that has not ever operated, be suspicious. And I'm just saying that in the context of, they're going to start throwing ideas at you that are not based in a lot of experience.
Right.
They're just hypotheticals. If you have an operator that actually has done things, then you can trust that you can look at their history and say that they've done things better. So for me to sit in a room with you or others and say, "You're telling me I just put money on the line and the model ain't gonna work," It's
Right.
that's not an exciting conversation.
Right.
The fact that you offered a perspective about how to make it work was probably the most exciting to me, because as an investor, I don't want you to tell me what you can't do. I want you to tell me what you can do. And what you offered in that conversation was, this ain't gonna work, but I got an idea about what can work. As back to the pivot question, I really don't care. What I probably said and maybe inferred from you is, can we get to the same exit? Can we create the same value if we take this turn and do something differently? And I think we probably had a debate and discussion about the nuances of what it would do, how it would help us, and whether or not it could achieve the goal. So for me, it's a perfect example. The collaborative nature of you starting. We're in that first meeting, like I described, where we're talking about deputization. We're talking about, I don't know you from Adam. All I know is you came here because you had a passion and a reason for wanting to be here. You felt there was something here that could create enterprise value that would make your financial and lifestyle perspective different and better. If I believe in that story, we're in this together. We're in this together. And then I open up the kimono and go, bring every idea. Bring every idea you have. And your idea was phenomenal in the context of, we're going to go against regulatory hurdles and challenges in the environment that our original business thesis might not be as viable at this time. So if we want to survive, we better figure out what other way is there to create liquidity that creates ability for us to survive through this. And that's exactly what we did. And I guess I'd turn it around and ask you, if you had a authoritative figure that didn't seem to want to listen, that wasn't receptive to your ideas, that kind of was like, that's not the game plan that we said we're going to go do, because we're going this way and you're walking in saying we got a problem. My guess is you would have turned around and walked out the door and never joined.
It would have been a no-brainer, because for me, it was very simple. I knew you either needed to pump another $2 million in, which I was pretty sure you didn't want to, or we need another revenue stream. But otherwise, I could join a company and it's gone in 8 weeks. What good is that? Yeah, not going to help anyone. The part about it, the part of the journey though that was so inspiring to me is, so we launched the trade desk. I think we did $200K in revenue in our first 2 weeks. We're all patting ourselves in the back. And then, even though we did absolutely nothing wrong, all of our bank accounts get frozen. And but for the sheer luck that we happen to have a bunch of our money in our crypto trading account or crypto trading wallet, we'd have been out of business. And how you and the rest of your partners handled that situation was, that's part of why I barely slept trying to get us out of that problem. Was you guys weren't trying to assign blame. You weren't like, I shouldn't have fucking listened to you in the first. It was none of that. It was just like, let's solve the problem. And I didn't even feel a hint of any blame assigning. And I think that was really inspiring for me personally.
Yeah, I think it goes back to a couple of fundamentals. The history that the three of us, Matt, Paul, and I have, that predates everything you're talking about, means you have stable, sane people that are not going to be wildly emotional. The second thing was, as we talked about, I came from a services technology business. We pivoted and said, let's do software, which is an entirely different business, to let's get into financial tech businesses that do alternative currencies. Yeah, I think each time, and there's many other examples, but each time we challenge ourselves to step into a new market, we come open-minded that we're not the smartest guys in the room. We don't profess to be. We hire really talented people and we inspire them to be really successful at what they do. In the particular example that you're bringing up, there wasn't a person in that room that would have foresaw that happening. We had done everything possible to avoid that happening. I believe we were unjustly punished because of a perception about what was going on in crypto, right? and you saw we fought hard against the system to demonstrate that we were above board and we were doing everything legitimate and honest under the constraints that we had. So I think, as is the case with any up and down cycle in any business, if you um, if you lose control of your emotions, if you let those in this particular case, it was business ending critical sort of stuff. Like it was as
Yeah.
bad as you could get. But if you let that break you, if you bend the knee to that, you're going to go down. You're going to go down. And what we recognized and what I think ultimately played out was we're in a playground that nobody's set the rules. We're playing a game that people are still trying to figure out. We're in a marketplace that is emerging, and standards and best practices and things that we would think would be commonplace are not necessarily established rules. So either we cower to that and we break, or we embolden ourselves and we stand forward and we go full charge. And as you saw, we stood behind the leadership and we stepped up and said, if you're confident that we're doing the right thing, we're willing to defend that, and we're willing to fight every day to make sure that we as a business are not going to go out. And fortunately, we took that stance and we weathered ourselves right through that storm. And in hindsight, we look back and we're so much stronger. We're so much more equipped. We hardened things that we weren't even sure we needed to harden. And we created a business that is now a market leader with talent that, in Brian's case and others' cases that worked with us, they're emboldened by the fact that we didn't cower under those circumstances. And now they're like, let's go faster, farther. And let me just go back to a statement I made earlier. If I say to you, let's start a business and exit it with $1 billion valuation.
Sounds appealing.
It's not even just appealing. It's exciting. That is, you're like, that's life-changing that's generationally life-changing on every level for every person that's involved. And I want everybody to feel that. I want everyone to walk away millionaires or multimillionaires. And I want them to say, I was in that game with that team and we won the Super Bowl. I want to feel that. And when you can tell people $1 billion valuation is achievable, $1 billion. If I get to $100 million recurring revenue and I got 10x multiple, I got $1 billion valuation. I'm done, baby.
Right.
This is it. I think if you don't set your bar high enough, if you don't say, why can't we? If you're not driven to overcome these obstacles and say, that's totally achievable, it might be, we might be $100,000 in revenue. We're like, we want to be a billionaire, right? But why not? And when you do that and you lean in, it's actually really exciting.
Yeah, I mean, the business is just, I mean, it's funny. My experience of business is it's not usually the bump in the road, or in Investiguy's case, the Grand Canyon in the road, that necessarily puts you out of business. It's panicking or a bad reaction to that. And I really did feel like everyone involved responded about as well as they could have. I mean, obviously I know we can't name names because of non-disclosures, but you had a banking relationship with the bank that had, you knew the CEO, right? And it wasn't like, oh, I'll make a phone call and everything's fine. It took months, and we came close.
We did. And part of that goes back to this notion that when you're skating out on ice that's thin and it's new, there's a really good chance you might fall through. There's a really good chance that if you want to emerge into a new marketplace, think about what we did is we said, we're going to be the leader in fintech to bring these types of transaction processes to customers that just don't know it. Like I think about the fact that, like when I talked about starting out my career in computers, they didn't know what they were supposed to be used for. Like the internet, we were on the internet in '85, and first generation of what do you do with this website? I mean, I was in Redmond, Washington with the Microsoft company and Bill Gates as they launched Windows 95. As they launched the browser, as they launched and told the world, hey, you're going to be able to use this browser. And I remember looking around going, there's a lot of people here that have no idea what this even means. When we're sitting here saying we want to give you the ability to trade cryptocurrencies through your banking app, and what we're fighting against is regulatory issues with the federal government because they don't think that's right for us to do that.
Right, yeah.
Or we have the word crypto in our name, so now we're criminals, so freeze our accounts. Like it's fun to be on that line because we're cutting new territory and we're forging into areas that people haven't been before. And to me, that's what energizes me and says, don't freak out. Yeah. Were there moments where we were like, okay, this is going to be a big challenge, but are we in the right? And that's what I think we went back to the team and we recognized is that they were absolutely confident that what we had done, we were in the right. And what we had realized is that these other, businesses were just not familiar with what we were doing and we had to educate them. So we went through it.
Yeah. I mean, it's funny because you're right. It made the business so much more resilient. Now all of a sudden, okay, we need to have, 3 bank accounts and we need to have our money spread over all these different places just in case. I mean, we might have course corrected, but hey, better to be a little bit over than underprotected. I want to pivot a little bit as we look to wrap up about, because one of the things I've seen from myself, both with myself and with people close to me that have had some decent financial exits is one of two things happens. Either the wheels come off because the thing that's been driving them, I have a good friend that had an 8-figure exit and one had a 9-figure exit. And in both cases, kind of the wheels came off. And I think that either you already know how to be happy and money is a magnifier of that. And it helps you. It's definitely easier to be happy when you have more money than when you have less. But I feel like that's what's driving you. And then you get to that finish line. Maybe it goes the other way. And having had not just yourself, but good close friends of yours and business associates that have had some really, big, financial exits. Talk about how money's a multiplier and how or magnifier and how you think about that.
You make money early on in life. I made $1 million when I was 30, the first million. And, there's a moment where you're like, just made $1 million, this is great. So 10 is cool. 50 is cool. I think it becomes less about measuring that number and more about if you're into sports or you're into, achieving goals in physical ways or spiritual ways. To me, the thing is less about the numbers. You get to a level where you're capable of you can retire and you don't have to do anything anymore. To me, I think back to that sort of subject we were just talking about, which is what inspires you? You briefly brought up Elon and you're like, dude's got $400 billion, right? Like He doesn't need to make any more money, but he keeps taking on more jobs, right? And
Right.
more responsibility. I think it's less about measuring yourself against those financial goals and objectives and more about what am I doing to contribute? What am I doing to impact the world? What am I doing to inspire others? You know, we had a uh, employee gathering recently in Austin, and you probably saw me. I was bouncing off the walls.
Yeah.
Like I was bouncing off the walls. And you're probably like, why is he so excited? Like, what's he? Cause it's like getting brought back down onto the baseball field and
Right.
you're talking to the players in the dugout and you're like, isn't this great? Isn't this awesome? And aren't you fired up about what we're doing? Like, do you get what we're doing? We're in this first inning of a freaking game that's going to change the industry. And I don't think as a leader, you can really do a justice unless you are passionately fired up about what you're doing. So for me, you pull me off the sidelines as an investor and you get me into the trenches. I'm like, let's go, let's fight, let's go, let's get something going. I get so energized by what we're doing and how it's going to impact the world and why it's so important. And I think if you can't bring that and you can't motivate people that way, if you can't recognize, shake the dust off of them every once in a while and go, I know you think that you're just doing a job. Like I know you got paid a paycheck every 2 weeks. But if you don't see what you're actually doing, if you don't watch how you're transforming this industry, if you don't watch how you're transforming life for average consumers, you've missed the party. Like the real excitement is in the passion of what you're doing. And when we talk to the people on the trade desk, or we talk to the people in the um, financial side of the business with Investify, they start to catch your energy.
Yeah.
They start to feel, oh, you're not just a money guy. You're crazy. Like you're in this because you want to be here to make this successful. To me, that is why we do what we do, and it is exactly the energy. So I don't measure it by how many dollars. I think this company and several others I'm invested in are going to do really well. It won't incrementally change my lifestyle.
Right.
It won't do it. My kids might be more wealthy. I don't know,
Right,
but
right, right.
I'm not going to get to benefit from it. Thank God the government's not going to take all of it away from me. So at some level, I'm actually pleased by that. But like, to me, it's more about what we're doing and why we're doing it, and the people you're doing it with. And I said this earlier. Some people might not have ever been able to taste that success. Like to make dozens of people multimillionaires
Yeah.
is the most enjoyable thing you can ever do. To make people independently wealthy and watch their wives and their children become independently wealthy because of the hard work that they put in, the dedication that they had, and the passion that they had. For me, if I can watch that, that's the best return I could ever have.
Oh, I couldn't agree with you more. People, and by the way, I mean, I can't even, almost every single person from our trip in Austin was like, Dalton's crazy, and holy shit, how cool is that? Talk about the difference between an operational investor and a traditional venture capitalist where, they went to Harvard and they never run anything. They never had to make payroll. It's night and day different. Night and day different.
No, and as you saw, and there's just something beautiful about it, when you can empower people to be very excited about what they're doing in life. And you can look at them and say, I care about you, and I'm not even sure where you are on the totem pole of leadership or whatever it is. Like you might just be answering the phone, but you're exciting to me because you're in the game and I want to talk to you. And to me, being exposed to those, I mean, it's kind of fun because I wish I get more invited to those things. I don't get as invited as I want to be, but like that's that to me is spiritual. That to me is passion and I love it.
Yeah. Well, so as I wrap up, I think you just told me you had your 30-year wedding anniversary.
Yes. Or due to have it in September.
Sorry,
Yeah.
you did have it in September, so that's rare these days. And two wonderful kids. Maybe talk a little bit about how you think about having balance. You're a very type A, alpha kind of guy. How do you think about balancing your personal and your professional life? Because even though you're, I don't know, what do I call you, semi-retired, but even though you're active on a bunch of boards, how do you think about that? And how do you think about, sort of this stage of your life?
It's a beautiful stage because it is I would call it semi-retired to retired, maybe leaning a little bit more to the retired side. You know, I I I think as anyone, you're just driven to want to be involved. You want to do something. I stay very active. I think the benefit at this age and having adult children is that we can go and visit with them. We do a lot of traveling to visit with them, and I think you know right now my workload isn't so much that I am consumed by everything that was once business. Um, I do believe that my kids are watching attentively to the drive and passion that you have. I take very strong stances on things like politics and religion and faith and you know they're going to either learn something from that or they're going to challenge you on it. And I don't mind the debate. Back to the discussion we had earlier. I'm like, bring it. Let's have a dialogue. To be at a stage where your children are adults and they can interact with you as adults and you're like it's a fascinating part of life and to be honest with you I'm blessed to be in a beautiful relationship and to be around beautiful children and the fortune of financial security allows you to be like, well, the market's up today, the market's down today. It ain't gonna change the outcome of what today's gonna bring. Um, I say that with all due respect to those who struggle every day and recognize that um, it ain't that easy for everybody. There's a lot of people that are still trying to climb that ladder. And I think part of what your charter should be is how can I help others? How can I reach out? How can I engage? And if there's any wisdom to share, let's try and share it.
So you have both a son and a daughter. Do you did you f- did you feel did you parent them in the same way, or did you feel like you parented them differently? I only have a daughter myself, and I'm certain that if I had a son, I would parent him differently. I'm just curious about your own experience.
I give a lot of credit to my wife because she's better at parenting, and to be honest with you, because of a vast majority of their lives, I was in the trenches doing the business sort of stuff. So, through their early development years and through their teens, I would say I was probably more absent because I was heads down into growing businesses. It's introspective to come back and be realizing that, oh, they are unique. I've got twins, so interestingly, they go through the same experiences. They were raised the same way. They same educational opportunities. Different people,
Right.
different people, and I don't think it's just a male and female thing. I think it's just they're different people, and you have to step back and realize we're all different. We we take in information differently. We absorb experiences differently. Um, both beautiful, wonderful people, but you can't try and mash that together and expect they're going to come out the same. And actually, more importantly, I think the beauty of life is that they are different. And what we've experienced is um, what drives them, what motivates life, what inspires them are different fundamentals, all being raised under the same experience, but just the way they perceive life is different. And it maybe even interesting to you would be, I don't think they look at what I've accomplished and say, I would like to do that. Which is
Right.
interesting because you're like,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
if you're a farmer, you're like, I want them to be a farmer. If you're,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
you're a steel worker, you're like, I would want them to be a steel worker. I'm a business guy. And they're like, I don't ever want to sit behind a desk ever in my life. I don't, I don't want to
Right.
do business. Like, and to me, that was challenging because I was like, well, why wouldn't you want to be an entrepreneur? Why wouldn't you
Right.
want to do this? Why wouldn't you want to be like dad or mom? I've come to the realization that we can just set the foundations and then watch what life's going to blossom out of these two. And as you will see with your daughter, you know, they're going to amaze you by what inspires them. Like for a while, I was like, you need to get into AI and you need to get into security and you need to get into this and that. Cause to me, I'm like, if I was to do it over again, what would I do differently? Where would I
Right.
go? And for them, it's just a different perspective. I'm humbled by the fact that they're going to make that decision, not me. And I get to watch the glory that comes from that.
Yeah. So last question. So flash forward 25 years, you're still around, but with a little bit more gray hair. What would you want your two kids to say about you?
I don't know that I think about what I want them to say about me as much as I would like them to be reflective of what type of person I was. As we've talked throughout this conversation, they're definitely going to check the box on he's crazy and he's driven and he's vocal about his position. I think in retrospect, you look back and go, I don't know that I was trying to teach them anything in that, but have a voice.
Mm.
Stand up for what you believe in. Be strong-willed and convicted about the principles that matter to you, that you care about. Life is going to be filled with all kinds of characters. They're all going to be pulling and pushing you in all kinds of different ways. But if you have a presence and you have a purpose and people will look up to you for that, I think my kids will go, he was exactly the way he said he was. He was driven and purposeful and vocal about his position. And in life, if you're not, and it goes by and you didn't, I'm not saying be, obnoxious or
Right.
callous about what you say, but I think too many people are not willing to speak, not willing to stand, not willing to challenge what is the norm. And to me, life is too valuable and too precious to let any day go by and not be convicted for what you believe in. And so, I'm a full believer of the fact that they're going to look back and go, he was nuts, but he was very transparent about it along the way.
There's a lot to be said about authenticity, and unfortunately, there's not as much of it in the world as there probably should be.
Exactly.
Chris, thank you so much for making the time. I really appreciate it.
Awesome, Dave. Appreciate it.